In this week's episode, I work on knocking out some of our to-do list prior to departing Belhaven. I get the dinghy out of the water and get the bottom painted, and discuss the few remaining things on our list that we need to complete prior to getting out of here. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sailing El Jaleo. We're about a week away from leaving Belhaven, and I've got a punch list of some things that I want to get done before we go, and one of those items was to take the dinghy out and get the bottom cleaned up and get it painted with an ablative bottom paint for inflatable dinghies. So this was kind of a bigger job, so I wanted to knock it out right quick, and the hardest part was actually getting the outboard off. It is a 15-horse Honda, and it weighs somewhere between 104 and 114 pounds, and I'm certainly not very strong, so that was a bit of a chore to get the outboard out without breaking my back. So the dinghy has been in the water for 4 months, and it does have, well, actually a little longer than that, probably 5 to 6 months, and it does have quite a bit of growth on the bottom there. We have been towing it behind the boat the entire time, so it has been continuously in the water. A bunch of barnacles, algae, some hair algae, just the basic stuff. There was what looked like a little bit of coralline algae that I'm familiar with that from having aquariums. It was a little bit different than that, but it had a similar consistency, and it did scrape off pretty easily, so it was something in that type. So this dinghy is actually made out of Hypalon. You can get dinghies typically in a couple of different materials. PVC is the other common material that dinghies are made out of. So there are some pros to PVC boats. They are lighter, they do fold up better. They are less expensive than Hypalon. Hypalon is, in PVC boats, they actually are not as durable, especially when it comes to chemical exposure and sunlight. So some of the things that you might wear commonly, you know, when you're using a dinghy, like sunscreen or insect repellent, PVC, it'll actually break down those, or those chemicals will break down PVC. So the Hypalon boats are much more chemically resistant, more durable. The exhaust from the diesel engine on the boat also can affect a PVC boat, but it will not affect Hypalon. So Hypalon, much more durable, less foldable, heavier material. So there are advantages to either, depending upon how you're going to use them. But for my purposes, Hypalon was by far the better choice. So that's what this dinghy is made of. So I did scrub the bottom of the dinghy with a brush, and I got quite a bit of the stuff off. The barnacles were attached really well, so I did have a plastic scraper. A lot of the hair algae and stuff, and the coralline algae were harder to get off, so I did scrape those, especially in the seams. I wanted to make sure I got the seams as clean as I could. That's where the stuff seems to attach the hardest, so I wanted to get those clean, so when I painted it, it wouldn't be an issue. Now, I scrubbed this thing for probably a good hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes. I got it as clean as I could, and then I went ahead and painted it. So the paint that I used was by Pettit, and it's a water-based ablative paint. So ablative paints are designed to wear off. So this is probably a bad description. Someone will probably correct me on this, but what I think of it is you're kind of painting on like a thick liquid chalk, and the chalk wears off, and nothing can adhere to it. So if something tries to adhere to it, it'll just slide, you know, it'll chalk off. So the paint is always wearing off very slowly, so nothing can grip it. I did put 2 coats on, so hopefully this will last, you know, 12 to 18 months. I guess we'll see. I did use the brand Pettit, their water-based inflatable ablative paint, and it does have, I think it's cupric, it's some sort of copper compound in it. I forget offhand, I should know that, but I apologize, I forget. So you can't use it on aluminum. So the transom, or the back of the very back of the boat, where you attach the outboard to, that is made out of aluminum. Now it is coated in paint, so I probably could have put the ablative paint on it and not had a problem. But the Hypalon does wrap up around the back of the transom, so I just kept the paint, and that is the primary part that's underwater. There was a little bit of hair algae above that point, so I know there's a little bit of exposure, but I didn't, like I said, I'm sure it would have been fine to paint that, but I decided not to. So after I scraped, I scrubbed it for quite a while with just soap water, just Dawn, and tried to get it as clean as I could. So this was one of the bigger projects we had to do. Hopefully we'll be leaving Belhaven in approximately a week. One of the big things that we're waiting on is I did have to order some new bedding. So I had been using sleeping bags for the entire winter and into the spring, and they've been working great. I found this brand of sleeping bag from Dick's Sporting Goods. They were very reasonably priced. They're called Quest. And the one that I used in the wintertime, the sleeping bag was rated down to 30 degrees, and it kept me warm the entire winter. I'd set the heater on at about 60 at night, and you know, it was great. And they were super cheap. Like, I think the one that was rated down to 30 degrees was maybe $35. And the one that I had ordered for spring and summer was rated down to 50 degrees. That was the warmest weather sleeping bag I could find. And that was cheap. It was only like 30 bucks. But the main drawback with those is they were made out of some sort of synthetic material, like a polyester or something along that line. And once you got into hot and humid weather, which we've been having the last few weeks, it really trapped the heat in. Those materials just didn't breathe very well. And when you've got 2 small thermonuclear generators sitting right beside you all night, you want something that can breathe. So I did order some cotton bedding, just a cotton throw and a couple of cotton sheets. That's what I'm used to using, and that's what I'd used my whole life. So I went ahead and ordered those, and they should be here within a week, so that's kind of why we're waiting around getting these last projects done. And as soon as they arrive, we should be ready to go. So the first coat went on really well. I did put 2 coats on, and you had to wait 3 hours in between coats, which I did. I got the second coat on a little later in the evening, and the sun had started to come out, so the second coat dried pretty quickly. It was a little hard to keep a wet edge, but it went on. It did have to cure for 16 hours before putting it back in the water, so I did leave it overnight, and then the next morning I got her back in the water and back to the boat. Some of the other things we have to do before we leave, the biggest thing remaining is to give the dogs a bath. They are both blowing their coats right now, so we've had a disaster in the cabin here. We've had hair tumbleweed blowing through all the time, and I vacuum 2 or 3 times a day, and it's just not enough to keep up. When they are blowing their coats, I do brush them several times a day, but it can be hard to get the fur to release, even though you see the tufts that want to come out. So I have found in the past that giving them a bath helps get that fur to release. So if I give them a bath before we go, hopefully we can eliminate a lot of that mess as we're traveling. There is a hose in the marina here that's got temperate water. It's not too hot, not too cold, so I can give them a bath right on the deck, and that should go pretty smooth. It is a little cooler this week, but towards the end of the week we should get back up in the low 70s, so I think that'll be okay to give them a bath then. I do also have to change the transmission oil for the diesel engine before we go. That has to be changed every 250 hours. The oil has to be changed every 100 hours, but I've still got around 50 hours left on that, so I don't have to worry about that for a little bit. After I got it painted, it was a little... I had to try and figure out how to get it back in the water without dragging it across the grass or scraping it on wood, so I was going to try and tip it in slowly, but she kind of just splashed in, and actually it went pretty well. Getting the outboard back on was a little trickier. Again, I'm kind of weak, and the engine only likes being oriented in certain directions. You have to lay it on a certain side, otherwise it can leak oil. And when I was getting it back in the dinghy, it did leak a little bit of oil. I did check the oil before starting the outboard, and everything was good. The oil level was fine. I got the gas can hooked back up, and she started right away on one pull. There was a puff of smoke, a puff of oil type smoke when I did first start it, and I assume that was just from a little bit of oil that had gotten somewhere it shouldn't have been. So it burned off quick, and she ran fine. From there, I took the dinghy back to El Jaleo, and I put the camera on just so you guys could see what it's like when the boat gets up on plane. I don't know if, for those of you that haven't been in dinghies before, when you're going slow, there's a lot of drag, and once you get up on plane, you're kind of skimming across the top of the water, and that's when you can get going faster. So when you've got all that drag, the nose of the boat actually climbs pretty high up out of the water, and when you get going on plane, it'll drop back down, and then you start skimming across the top of the water, and that's when you can start going pretty quick. We haven't had the dinghy loaded down very heavily yet. It's just been primarily me and the puppies, and we've gotten up on plane no problem. It'll be interesting once we get supplies in there for, you know, supply reprovisioning runs, how it performs then, but it's been great so far, and the dogs love going for rides. There are a couple of things, or one other thing that I'd like to get done before I leave. I don't want to have to stop in a marina that much on the way back north. I'd like to go a couple of weeks at least without having to stay in a marina. So it would be nice if I could get a couple of episodes finished prior to leaving, so you guys can still watch those episodes while I'm out cruising around making some new content, and then I can have a couple ready, so the next time I stay in a marina I can go ahead and get those uploaded. And that is it for this week. I hope everyone's doing great, and I will see you again next week. Have a good one. Thanks for watching. Hey, Hoob. What do you guys think, huh? What do you think, tuna fish, huh? What's going on, bud? Hoob. All right, I'm coming, guys.